Hey everyone. So if you know the first thing about me, you'd know that Avenged Sevenfold are my favourite band of all time. I mean, I've got like 10 plus band shirts of them now, I've got a pendant, I've got a bloody flag of them, I've got all the albums, I love all the albums, and yet I've never dedicated a whole video to talking about this band that I've been a fan of for 9 years now, which is nearly half my life. So that's why this video is here, for me to discuss and talk about all their albums and where I rank them and how much I love them, you know? It's just an excuse for me to talk about my favourite band and talk about the albums they've made, so yeah. And in addition, obviously it being the 20-year anniversary of their very first album, Sounding the Seventh Trumpet, I thought it was very fitting to do this ranking video. So what I'm going to be doing is ranking all of their studio albums, so I'm going to be ranking all the way from Sounding the Seventh Trumpet all the way to their 2016 album, The Stage. I will be taking into account when ranking them their B-sides, because that may sway me into sticking them above or below other albums. And I do want to say this is incredibly hard for me to choose where to put these on the list, because I love every single album that they've made. I'm not even joking. Every single one is beautiful to me. There's a redeeming factor for every single album they've made, and I love every single one of them that they've created. So this was very, very difficult for me to make a list out of. But I do want to say this list will not include the Pinkly Smooth stuff or the Black Rain EP, just because they're not full Avenged Sevenfold albums, are they? So it wouldn't really be fair to rank those in this list anyway. But no, we're just going to get straight into it and talk about the number 8th spot, which is the lowest on the list. So let's do that now. So for the last spot on the list is their first album, Sounding the Seventh Trumpet. Now, this is not a bad album by any means. This actually happens to be one of my favourite metalcore albums that have ever been released. I think this album is actually really, really good. I really like it. Even though it's in the last spot, something has to go last, and it just happened to be this one. Obviously, it's their first album, so they had to start somewhere. It's got a very garage sound. A lot of the songs kind of seem to blend together a bit too much on this album, which is an issue that doesn't actually come up again, which obviously shows the growth of the band and their quality control as they go forward with the next albums. Obviously they had no production when making this album, so obviously this one obviously had a disadvantage right off the bat, but it doesn't make it a bad album. In fact, there are so many songs on here that I still go back to and listen to on here, even though it is the weakest in my opinion. Some of the standouts for me are Shattered by Broken Dreams, which is a fucking banger. It's so experimental. It has all the seeds laid for how experimental the band would become in later albums. Love Streets as well, I love. Lips of Deceit has an amazing riff. Oh, the riffs in this album. Genuinely, you can tell that Sin had so much fun, like just shredding away on his guitar while recording these. Just so creative. The guitar work is by far the strongest part of this album. Actually, no, the drumming. Of course, the drumming. But you know what I mean, though. This album has just got so many good things going for it that people don't give it credit for. But obviously the absence of Johnny Christ on this album is very apparent, just based on it, the sound and all that. So that's obviously why this had to go at the bottom. Something has to, doesn't it? My favourite track on the album is actually The Art of Subconscious Illusion. I fucking love this. Is one of their best songs for me personally. It just slips under the radar because it's on this album. But yeah, I'm going to shut up about this now, and I'm going to move on to the number 7th spot, so second to last on the list. So this was the last spot, Sounding Seventh Trumpet. Great album all the same. Doesn't mean it's bad just because it's on the last spot. Next, we have a shocker, to be honest. Even for me, when I was ranking these, something had to go second to last. And I don't want to get hate for this because I still love this album, but it is their 2016 album, their latest one. Now, when this first came out, I worshipped this album. This album was in fact one of my favourites of the band, like second or third favourite when it came out. And obviously part of that was because of recency bias, but another part of that is just because of how unique sounding it was. It had a very prog sound, it was very experimental, even for this band who has been renowned for having these long experimental pieces to end off albums. This one just goes above and beyond, pushes the boat out so far with their songwriting, and it's really good. It's got a very unique sort of sci-fi sound as well, which obviously made me love it a lot of the time. I think the only reason this has went down is because there aren't as many standout songs on there for me anymore, and plus I'm so burnt out of listening to this album, considering we've been waiting 5 years for a follow-up to this album. We haven't had an album since, and I'm starved. I'm starved for more. I need more Avenged Sevenfold, guys. The standouts on this album are, obviously the title track is the best song on this album by far. I fucking love The Stage. It's such a good song. I also love Goddamn, Sunny Disposition, Roman Sky, and Exist. And I also really like their covers of Retro Vertigo and As Tears Go By. Those two especially are really, really good on the B-side. But yeah, this is a cracking album. I still love it. It has a very close place to my heart because I have so much nostalgia from when this album came out. My mate and I was just exploding with excitement when the single came out initially, and then the album was announced. We were just so hyped for this release, so still so much nostalgia attached to this album, so I love it. Honestly, such a good album. But yeah, on to number 6 on the list. At number 6, we have their second album, Waking the Fallen. This is where they perfected their metalcore sound. We also get hints that they were starting to steer away from it from songs like Clairvoyant Disease, which happens to be my favourite track on the album. But yeah, this album is actually really, really good. I love this one as well. This is one of the earlier ones that I discovered when going through this band's discography. There are so many good tracks on here, to be honest. The only reason why it's at number 6 is there are just less standout songs than the albums above it, I guess, is really the best way to describe it. Obviously, some of the standouts on here are Unholy Confessions, Chapter 4, Second Heartbeat is obviously a classic, you can't go wrong. Those are obviously the standouts, but I do also really like I Won't See You Tonight as a collective whole. I think part 1's slightly better though. But yeah, this album is really good as well. I really love it. And obviously, considering it's their second album as well, the production was actually really, really good on this one as well, so it really does bump it up a lot higher. And obviously this album was the completion of the lineup that we all love, the OG one, with Matt, Brian, Jimmy, Johnny, and Zach, obviously. So it's such a good album this one is, obviously. Considering it was so early on in their stages as well, it's just a testament to how good they are as a band, to be honest. But yeah, that was Waking the Fallen. I really love this one. But yeah, it had to go at 6, I'm afraid. Alright, in at number 5 on the list, we have one that has got a cult following to it, which means I might be crucified for sticking it this low. We have City of Evil. Now, there's nothing wrong with this album. In fact, I fucking love it, which is why I put it bang in the middle. It's just there are the albums after this just slightly stronger for me personally. This one is what was their big break. This was the one that really blew up, especially songs like Backcountry and Seize the Day. Like, this album was the band's like first rush of fame, really, which is why this one is so renowned for the band. And I really love it as well. It's really good. It's very polished. They very much abandoned the metalcore sound they started with to explore more corners of metal subgenres they wanted to experiment with, which is one of the reasons why I love this band so much, because they dip their toes in so many different corners of metal and all the different subgenres to get a taste for it and see if they can master it, and that's why I love them, because they're not sticking to one niche, they are trying everything and they are experimenting, and I love that. And this album is no exception. I really, really love it. It has a really unique sound to it, and the standout tracks for me on this album are Beast in the Harlot, Blinded in Chains, Backcountry, Seize the Day, and Strength of the World. Those are my favourites, I think, but I think every track on here is good and there is no skip on this whole thing. It's just a very solid album, to be honest, and I can see why it would be a lot of people's favourites, but for me it does fall slightly because it doesn't speak to me. It doesn't jump out at me as much as some of the other ones do. But yeah, still number 5, still love it to pieces, it's brilliant. On to the next one. Alright, next on the list we have, for number 4, Nightmare. Now, this is the band's Grief album, because this album was written and released in response to their drummer The Rev's passing. Poor Jimmy The Rev Sullivan sadly passed away before production of this album. He's even on the cover there, Forever, in the tombstone. I don't know if you guys can see that, but it says Forever on there. So this album is obviously a lot more emotional to listen to, because you can hear the pain and grief that the band is going through while recording this, through Matt's vocals, through Sin's guitar, through everyone in the band, really. It just feels very somber and very depressing to listen to, because you can feel the emotion being poured into this album as a tribute to their friend Jimmy, because they all grew up together covering Pantera, Metallica, and all these bands they grew up with, and sadly, one of them has passed away, and that's really sad for them. And it's really sad, it honestly is so depressing. But this album is banging. There are so many standout songs on here. You can really tell that they poured their heart and soul into the thing. I think this band has really had a few magnum opuses, but I think this is one of their strongest ones in that regard. They clearly put their all into it in every aspect and every minutiae of what they do in an album, this is very, very strong for that. Some of the standout songs on here are Nightmare, Welcome to the Family. I also really, really love Natural Born Killer. So Far Away is so emotional. It's such an emotional acoustic song. It's so sad to listen to, but so powerful. Victim is also such a good power ballad. I cannot express that enough. And then Save Me, experimental, awesome. I love Save Me. That's another very, very strong song of theirs that's very powerful and very experimental, like I say. Obviously they were juggling a few different guest drummers for this one, because obviously they had someone to fill in, didn't they? But yeah, this album was very much a passion project for them, and you could tell. The album art, I think this is the best album art that they've had. It just looks so striking and cool and creepy. This album is very strong, and I can see why it's a lot of people's favourites. It is such a good one. But yeah, that's it for this one. It's a great album though, I fucking love it, and it's so sad when you hear the story behind the production of making this one as well. But yeah, that'll do it for number 4. Let's move on to number 3 on the list. Alright, at number 3, speaking of magnum opuses, I think if any band had a magnum opus, it would be their self-titled, because every song on here is different from each other, and there are just so many strong songs on here that have so many different genres in there. They were clearly wanting to experiment so much in this, and you could really tell. Every song on here is a banger, there's no skip, it's just flawless writing in my opinion. You have some Western style with the Gunslinger, you have some classically heavy metal with Critical Acclaim and Almost Easy. Afterlife is a lot more proggy, a lot more alternative. Dear God is just an acoustic ballad to end off the album. By the way, I love it when they end off an album with a ballad. It's just a lovely way to end an album in general, because it's reflecting on the chaos that you've just listened to. It's just a great sort of somber thing to reflect on the awesome album that you've just heard, which is why I love that Dear God is the last track on here. And there are a lot of different songs on here that the Rev has wrote as well, and this album is all recorded and written by every member of the band. Every member of the band put their all into writing this album, and you could tell. And also, A Little Piece of Heaven has hints of Pinkly Smooth sort of sounding stuff as well, which is kind of cool, to be honest. I like that little detail in there. But yeah, I love this album. This album is so good. I would say I want to put out my standouts, but I think every song on here is a standout. But I will just go through my personal favourites on here. So we have Critical Acclaim, which is I fucking love. Scream is also amazing, a very, very close place to my heart, that song has. Afterlife is really good. Brompton Cocktail is experimental and creepy and sort of sludgy, grungy as well, which is really cool. A Little Piece of Heaven happens to be one of my favourite songs of theirs of all time as well. I think this whole album is brilliant though. You can't go wrong with this one. It's clearly if any album of theirs was their magnum opus, this would be it, I think, at least for their first lineup. Just how they put their all into it, and they were clearly motivated to make this. They wanted to make good music, and they clearly did it here. They knocked it out of the park. Love self-titled so much. Anyway, let's move on to number 2. Alright, at the number 2 spot, we have Hail to the King. This was the first album that I heard of theirs, so there's obviously going to be a bias to why I put this one so high. Obviously, I love it to pieces. Obviously, the songwriting and production is a tiny bit more simplistic than the previous albums to this one, but I love how heavy it sounds and how iconic the songs sound as well. I fucking love Hail to the King, Shepherd of Fire, Doing Time, This Means War, Heretic, Coming Home, and Acid Rain. What did I say about ballads ending off an album? Acid Rain is one of the best power ballads I think I've ever heard from any band ever. I love Acid Rain so much. Such an emotional song to listen to as well, about nostalgia and childhood and all that. So Crimson Day is also a lovely ballad as well. Planets is really heavy and cool, and Requiem is satanic and evil sounding. It's just a really, really, really good album. And like I say, it's the first album that I heard of Avenged Sevenfold, so I'm obviously going to have a soft spot for it. This album is just OP. There's no skip on it. I love every single one on here. I think the album art is simple and basic, but it is iconic all the same. You can't go wrong with an album cover with a death bat on it, you know what I mean? It's number 2. If you want to disagree with me, you can, but this album is masterful in my opinion. There are so many iconic, heavy songs on here. I love it personally. But yeah, that's Hail to the King, that's my number 2. And you guys are probably surprised why this next one is my number 1, but let me explain. So, in the number 1 spot, we have Diamonds in the Rough. And yeah, I know, put a comp album at number 1, put a B-side album at number 1. There are just so many songs on here that are bangers. I love this thing so much. This original CD case I got so many years ago now, and it comes with a DVD of Diamonds and of Live at the LBC. What a beautiful performance by the band. So I watched that live performance religiously on this DVD in this case, as well as listening to the original B-side tracks that are on here. My absolute favourite song of the band of all time for a very long time was Dancing Dead. I love Crossroads, I love Flash, their cover of Flash of the Blade obviously. Until the End is a banger. Demons is amazing, Fight is amazing. I actually prefer the alternative version of Afterlife on this album rather than the White Album, the self-titled album that I mentioned earlier, which obviously is a hot take. I think everyone would prefer the original version of Afterlife, but for me, I prefer the alternate version that's on here, which is kind of funny, but you know, that's just personal preference, I suppose. It's a good song regardless. But no, this album's great, and it's only made better by the 2020 release of this, because this was released in 2010, because most of this album was written for the White Album and a bit from City of Evil, but they didn't know what to do with them, so they just stuck all these songs on this comp album. But like I say, the 2020 like re-release of this with the additional songs like 4 AM, St. James, Set Me Free, Lost It All, and then the cover of Paranoid, I think, was the other one that was added onto the 2020 version. Just with the addition of Set Me Free alone. Set Me Free is my favourite song of Avenged Sevenfold of all time, so it's a no-brainer sticking this at number one. Originally, it was always a bit of a toss-up between which album was my favourite, between this one, Hail to the King, and then the White Album. It's always been a toss-up, but after the 2020 version of this, it's an easy choice to stick this at the very top just because of how many good songs are on here. I could praise this album to no end and defend it to the day I die. This album is so fucking good. Obviously, I've already mentioned all the standouts, but like I say, Set Me Free and Dancing Dead are two of my favourite songs of all time, and they both are from this album. I don't have the new release of the 2020 out version of this, but I can listen to it on Spotify, and I'll get it eventually, obviously. To be honest, I might actually end up getting the vinyl of it, because it's very, very tempting, as you probably would expect. There's nothing but praise for this album. There's no skip on this whole thing, especially with, like I say, the additions from the 2020 version. Oh, and the album art from the 2020 version is beautiful as well, but I do also like the Live at the LBC cover that I have for this edition as well. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I've said everything I want to say about this album. I just want to say, if you haven't really given this album much thought, give it another chance, because there is a lot to love on here, and there's a lot of untapped potential on here. Nothing but high praise for this album. But like I say, this list is very subjective. Like, this is probably subject to change in a week's time, you know, because like I say, I love every single one of these albums. Some more than others, obviously, but every single album has so many positives to them that it's difficult for me to hate any of them. So like I say, this top 8 or whatever would probably change in a week's time, probably, but this is my list right now, and this is usually very consistently my favourite album of theirs. So, by the way, if you were wondering where I'd put the Pinkly Smooth album or Black Rain, I'd put Black Rain and Pinkly Smooth probably at the same level, like between The Stage and Waking the Fallen. So let's put this in a top 10 form with Pinkly Smooth and Black Rain in mind, so in case anyone was wondering. So number 1, Diamonds in the Rough, number 2, Hail to the King, number 3, The White Album, number 4, Nightmare, number 5, City of Evil, number 6, Waking the Fallen, number 7 would be the Pinkly Smooth album, number 8 would be Black Rain, number 9 would be The Stage, and then number 10 would be Sounding the Seventh Trumpet. By the way, this list is as fragile as anything. It could change at any moment because I love this band and all they do anyway, so, you know, who fucking cares? It's just a fun ranking video. You have to take my opinion seriously. But in case you do, please be kind in the comments, and speaking of the comments, let me know what your ranking of these albums would be if your list differs from mine. If it doesn't, let me know. Let me know what your favourite albums are, favourite songs are, etc. And let's have a discussion about it, you know, because this is a band that I love. Maybe it's a band that you guys love as well, so let me know. But yeah, if you want to see more ranking videos like this, maybe it's a TV show or a band or something of that nature, let me know as well if you want to see anything else similar to this. So yeah, that's been me. I'm going to wrap it there. I hope you guys enjoyed, and yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.